and welcome to Northwest Knitting. My name is Kathy, and this is my knitting podcast where I talk to you about my knitting projects and all the ideas I have about yarn and clothes and some other things, maybe talk about books and some other things. So mostly my craft is knitting. So it has been a very long delayed spring, but yesterday we had some gorgeous weather and I was out in the garden and it felt fantastic. So I just heard something today about digging in the soil is got some properties in it that are almost antidepressant properties. And I have to say that it is at least a mood booster for sure. That and a really good long walk. So anyway, that's been fun. So thank you so much for watching. I love your comments and I'm really glad that you're joining me here today. The main thing I'm going to talk about is what I'm wearing, which is the Pressed Flowers cardigan by Amy Christophers, also known as Savory Knitting. I've talked to you about this twice before, so some of this will be repetition, but since it's finished and since other people might be interested who haven't seen those episodes before, I just thought I'd start from square one on this project. So I've really enjoyed the project and I'm real happy with the finish. And I used Lichen and Lace, Rustic Heather Sport in the coal colorway. And this contrast color right here is Entropy, Feederbrook Farm Entropy DK, which is 100% blue face Leicester. And they're both non-superwash. And you can see the color shift and this gorgeous inside, which I have to say is pretty fun. If I were neater about doing my ends, I might be tempted to wear it inside out. It's so fun. And I'm wearing underneath it my Derecho by Alison green that I talked about last summer, which is in the Berroco remix. So anyway, this is a kind of top, this Derecho, I could imagine wearing this sweater over quite a bit. It's, okay, and I should explain that the Lichen and Lace is a sport weight. The Entropy is a DK, but I feel that it knits at a lighter, it feels like a lighter weight to me than DK. And so they really seemed evenly matched when I swatched. So you know how it is. It's one of those gauge shifting yarns, I think. And it was a nice contrast. The Entropy is so soft and the Lichen and Lace is very crunchy, rustic yarn made out of a combination of Canadian breeds, well, wool from a combination of breeds. I don't know if they're Canadian breeds, but and it feels really good. The combination feels really good. It's just like a bouncy, stretchy feel to it. That's really interesting. So I've been really quite thrilled working on this. It's been so satisfying. I will say, though, that it has really taken me a while, and I was surprised at how long it took. So I enjoyed it, but I see that other people knit it much faster, but even giving it my full attention, it was more than 6 weeks really to come up to finish this. And of course, it was knit flat and you have the button band at the end and, you know, you have to put the sleeves on and so forth. So it all took a while to get it together. So enjoyable, but for me, time consuming. So I noticed that she has a brand new design that's the pressed flowers design in a pullover. So it's knit in the round, top down, and it's knit DK weight on a 21 stitches, 21 stitches for every 4 inches, whereas the cardigan is, she calls for sport weight yarn, and the gauge is 24 inches for 4 inches. So for me, that, so it's 6 stitches an inch, which is a place I feel pretty comfortable, between 5 and 6 stitches per inch. So I don't know if I would use this, if this yarn was knit at that gauge, it would be much looser. To me, this sweater feels like I'm wearing a DK weight, and it's probably because of the mosaic. So you're only using one color at a time, but there's a lot of yarn back there. So I don't know. I'm tempted by that pullover, but probably not anytime this in the next month or two. So let's see, I used a size 5 needle for the pattern here, and I used size 3 for the rib. And oh, I should say something. In her, she doesn't actually have it in the pattern, I don't think. I'm not seeing it. But in her note, on her Ravelry page for the cardigan, she suggests that if you're going to use a woolly rustic wool, that you use fingering to sport weight, but that if you're using a more slippery superwash type wool, she recommends sport to DK. So that was very interesting. I've never seen a designer make that kind of a recommendation, but it does say something to me about how different yarns have a much different outcome. I think that if I had done this in a superwash yarn, that it would be much longer, which was my initial plan, was that it be longer. But I think if it were superwash, it would be longer whether I planned for it or not. Okay, so on the stitching, not step on my yarn here. So on the stitching, I did have this plain stitch here. You can really see it up here. This plain stitch is a 4-row pattern, and it really isn't too hard to memorize, although I have to say it took me a little longer than I expected. And then of course you're working that plain stitch around these flowers. And one thing that's helpful to remember is that the flowers are knit in stockinette. So anytime you're doing the flowers, you just need to remember that if you're on the right side, you're knitting, and if you're on the back side, you're purling with that contrast color. And there is purling. Every 4 rows, there's at least 1 whole row of purling, which doesn't trouble me, but I know some people don't enjoy it. As you get to the, as you're decreasing here, you have to use your own judgment as to whether to include these flowers. And so I just decided I couldn't, it would look awkward if I kept going up there, which is why there's more plain stitch there. You don't have to worry about that on the back so much because it's pretty, it's more straight. One thing she does is she has a stair step bind off that she uses for the shoulder. And I remember years ago that stair step really was difficult me with my first seamed sweater project. And so I looked up alternatives. Some people did replace that with short rows. And I thought about it, but I also thought, oh, I didn't feel up to it. And also I thought I should trust the designer on this. Also, I looked into the sloping bind off, and Brooklyn Tweed has a really nice little tutorial on how to do the sloping bind off. But I felt with the color changing, I couldn't figure out how to do the color changing and the sloping bind off. So maybe greater minds have some idea on that. But I will say that having done the stair step shoulder here, it was not difficult to seam it, and it went very smoothly. I mentioned to you last time that a knitting friend strongly suggested that I block the sweater before I seam the shoulder, and I'm really glad I did. I think they turned out very nice and pretty smooth there. And it did mean I ended up blocking twice, because then once I finished the sleeves, I had to block again. For the sleeves, I actually was so unsure about the fabric of the yarn changed and loosened so much with blocking. I can't say it really stretched a huge amount, but it just had this relaxing and loosening up. And so I felt a little unsure about the sleeves. So I put them on, I've now dropped my glasses. I put them on a barber cord, and then I blocked it, which I thought was pretty clever. I was really proud of myself. But when I tried really hard to get them to not splay out while they were drying. I tightened up the barber cord so they'd be really tight, but still one of them did flare a little bit when I took out the cord, and I ended up re-knitting maybe 3 or 4 rows of one of the sleeves to tighten it back up. So anyway, but it's an idea, and it turned out the sleeves were really close to where I wanted. And I just did an ordinary bind off in rib. So, and it seemed fine. I thought about doing something fancier for the bind off here, but again, I just did an ordinary bind off, and I think it just looked fine. I experimented with the pearl I-cord bind off, which I had done on a little baby sweater, and I liked it so much, but I couldn't, this yarn is so, first it's dark and it's really rustic. I couldn't see any advantage. So I think on a different yarn that can show up really nicely, but because I couldn't even see the difference, that I just didn't do it that way. Okay, and as I mentioned last time, I did intend it to be longer, and I hope I'm not repeating myself because I just re-recorded this when my printer started making noises, but the designer recommends 12.5 inches measured from the bottom till the where to go. It is so hard to find that. There you go. There's the sleeve. And I did 13 inches. And And it was still much shorter than I expected, because as I was telling you last time, I expected this to be the beginning of the sleeve, and I forgot I was doing drop shoulder. And I've never done a drop shoulder before, so that's part of my excuse here. But I intended the sweater to be this much longer. So if this weren't superwash, it would be longer eventually, wouldn't it? But I don't think it will be. And let's see, what else was I going to say? Oh, this is, as I mentioned, this is my first drop shoulder sweater, and I've been unsure about those. I always thought that they'd create too much, maybe too much fabric around here, but it really, I do really like the fit of it. So I think more drop shoulders are in my future, and I could see doing a drop shoulder summer sweater or top, because it would, I think it made it, because of the drop shoulder, it made it really much more forgiving. It's going straight down, and I'm really happy with the fit. Now, I planned, so I'm interested in your opinion about whether I should do buttons. I kind of am liking it without. On the other hand, I never omit buttons. So I had thought that I would use these. Let's see if I can get that there. So cute. Just pretty plain. But this feels a little big. It's feeling too big for the buttonhole. I do have plenty of this one. I have to say that I'm imagining this sweater with bigger buttons than the buttonholes will allow. So I probably should have thought about that a little more. I don't know. So there's that. I also thought I had enough of these, and I think this size, she calls for 5/8 buttons at 5/8 of an inch, and those could also work, but I only have one of these, so I don't know what happened to the other one. So the buttons are, I don't know, even though I probably wouldn't button it most of the time, I can imagine sometime I'm at the ocean, or I'm somewhere, and I suddenly just really wish I could button that sweater. I don't know. Where do you stand on the issue of buttonholes and buttons? Anyway, so let me see what else. I think I have covered most of it, and this is going to be a much shorter episode than I planned. I will show you, this is the designer in her pattern, and there we go. So it's really nice, and it's sort of, all of a sudden people are knitting all kinds of variations. She has a hat, a cowl. She started with the shawl, which is really tempting to me. And boy, that is really tempting, I have to say. And then now she has the pullover, and I saw her being interviewed by the Starlight Society. There's a knitting store in Portland. I'll put the link below, and they're doing a knit along of pressed flowers. And if I can get a decent picture of this, maybe I'll post it with their hashtag. But they were interviewing her, and she was talking about the possibility of doing a pullover in this gauge, in a V-neck. So that would be tempting too. I have to say, but if you do it in the round, I think that you have to do more purling. So if you're purling adverse, then this one or the shawl might be more your cup of tea. Speaking of, this is my mint today. Mint tea. Okay, so that is pretty much it for knitting. As I talked before, I'm thinking about doing a shawl with these, which are natural yarns that I bought locally from Sword Farm. Shetland wool, reared and sheared in Oregon, but I really feel the need to put a color with it, so I'm debating this, which is, oh gosh. Actually, this might be Ramaphenol. I was thinking also that this would be a possibility, because this is Shetland wool, this is Shetland wool. It might be nice to have that together. So this is the Elemental Effects Shetland fingering 100% North American Shetland wool. So it's Shetland breed, not made in Shetland for both of these. And I have to say that Shetland wool is pretty darn nice. It's just, you know, if you've knit with Jamieson and Smith, and this is very, you know, it's the same breed, really, really delightful. Oh, and here was the other one. Actually, I was thinking the dark with this. So the question is what shawl? And I have knit quite a few shawls, but I'm not a prolific shawl knitter, and I want something that's easy, and I need some projects for we're going to Ireland in a couple days for a month, and I need some projects where I just don't have to think too much. But I also would like something, so at night there are some days where I have a little bit more of a challenge. So I am making way too big a deal out of this. But I have been struggling to find the pattern that I really like. I would, obviously, because I'm looking at these colors, not wanting to make it all one color. I want to have some color change in here, and finding the right pattern has been tricky. I'm looking for something that uses 3 colors. There's a kit that Woolly Thistle is doing that, boy, I cannot remember the name of it, but I'll put the link. So if you look below in my show notes, I'll put possibilities, and I'll put the name of the shawl that I'm looking at. The only thing that's worrying me about that is that there's not, it hasn't been knit by many people. I'm curious if others are reluctant to do a project where you don't see very many people trying it. Do you see a new design and you just feel like you can do anything and you just embark on it, and if it's something that has some issues, you just feel like you can roll with the punches? Or are you like me, wanting to see more people with their projects? I'm curious. I'd like to be a little bolder. If I see somebody like Amy Christopher's come out with a new project, I will not hesitate to start it right away. But when I just see that somebody doesn't have a lot of test knitters or finished projects, then I feel like I don't have a good feel for how it goes. So anyway, I just need to be bolder maybe and just give it a go, and I could always veer off and do it the way I want if I felt frustrated with it, huh? Couldn't I do that? So anyway, that is that. So I think I probably will bring a skein maybe of some of the ultra alpaca, or I have both of these, and at the ready to maybe do a Sophie shawl if I feel like I need more to do. But I'm hoping to get at least 2, if not 3 projects kind of ready to go. And they're probably, this is fingering yarn here that I'm talking about for this shawl. They're probably going to be fingering weight projects so they don't take up too much space. I also looked at a possible sweater, light summer top, and I do have some yarn that is BC Garn Summer in Cashmere. It's 90% cotton and 10% cashmere, and I was swatching for that. It is, then I am talking about knitting at a very finer gauge on much smaller needles, maybe like 3 or maybe 4 at the biggest. And I was thinking of the possibly the Salty Air Tea, and I'll put the link for that below. I'm just finding that what I want to knit doesn't necessarily fit with travel plans, but I'll work out something. I have 3 more days to finalize this. And of course, I am going to go to yarn stores and also, you know, I'm planning to go to Studio Donegal in Kilcar in County Donegal. So I always have opportunities there. So maybe I should just bring 2 projects and be open to starting something new if I find some new yarn. I travel really lightly. We go carry-on, even to go for a month. So as I was talking last time, I bring a very small amount of clothing, and but I will bring, I have a duffel bag that's a Bagolini duffel bag, and it packs down to a really small size. And I pack that. I hate it in some ways because it takes up an awful lot of space. So if you don't use it, you feel frustrated. But if I think what I'll do is I'll bring it, and we'll rent a car, and so we'll do carry on till we get there, and then when we rent the car, we can kind of our suitcases can explode into the car a little bit, and put dirty clothes and things and possibly yarn, in newly purchased yarn, into that duffel bag, and then I will check that on the way back when I'm less worried about I just hate to get to a place and find that all this packing I did so thoughtfully and carefully is just gone. It might be a good life lesson to not be too attached to my my possessions and to be more relaxed about everything, but it would be a lot easier if I just got my suitcase there. So anyway, that's what's happening with that. Finally, I'm going to end with telling you about a book that I'm almost to the end of, and I am so enjoying it. So it is called To Speak for the Trees My Life's Journey from Ancient Celtic Wisdom to a Healing Vision of the Forest. And it's by Diana Beresford-Kroeger. And she is a botanist and a medical biochemist who had an extraordinary childhood in Ireland, learning ancient Celtic knowledge about plants and living, basically. And she has spent her scientific background looking at plants and using them, and often verifying the ancient wisdom she learned by scientific experimentation. It is a really beautiful book. It's kind of a combination of a memoir. So at the beginning, she really talks a lot about her childhood, and it is really wonderful as she is taught by family and people connected to her family in County Cork. And then she gets into her scientific background and her focus on botany, and her move to Canada, where she and her husband now own quite a bit of acreage, and which they are filling with trees. And at the end of the book, she has, and I am almost at the very end, she has a final part called The Celtic Alphabet of Trees, and she talks about the alphabet for each tree, and then she talks about the tree. So these are trees that she considers the important trees in the world. And it's just really beautiful. If you enjoyed braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, I think you'd really like this book. It's much shorter than Kimmerer's and very much more her own story, but she and Kimmerer are on the same path of looking at the natural world, and also their ancient wisdom from their respective cultures, and it's really lovely. So some of her discoveries have actually involved medicines that help cure cancer. She's really an extraordinary person. There's also I've been watching Anya on Fraoch Knits, and she talks a lot about the ancient Celtic wisdom involving plants. And I kind of was thinking of her when I saw a New York Times article about Diana Beresford-Kroeger. And so I will put a link to the New York Times article, and I hope that you can open it even if you don't subscribe. But anyway, she's a fascinating woman, and also I think there's some interviews with her, so she's really interesting. Basically, she's asking all of us to plant trees as a partial solution to climate change that, as she says, will buy us time. So anyway, I highly recommend the book. It's quite wonderful, and I'm just so happy that there are people like her that are doing that work. So anyway, I am going to end here. It will be a little longer before I see you again, because I'll be gone for a full month. And but hopefully I will have some knitting to talk about, and maybe even some footage when I get back. So hopefully it won't be too long, maybe by the end of May, I will have a new episode for you. I hope you're all doing well and staying healthy. I am very paranoid of of getting sick before I get on that airplane, and I'm taking all kinds of immune supporting things like airborne and emergency and some other things, and I'm hoping I get on the plane healthy, and I'll be masking for most of this. I'm not looking forward to the journey because we have 3 flights to get there, and then staying healthy. So that's my hope. So I stay healthy through the trip. So anyway, I hope you're staying healthy and that you have lots of fun crafting to do. And until I see you next time, happy knitting.